Very disturbing to hear these things and kind of see someone on the streets that appear to.
Tiffany Henyard, the self-declared super mayor of Dunn, Illinois, is facing an unprecedented crisis as the November election draws near. Her campaign, once considered a strong force, has descended into complete disarray, with her approval rating plummeting to a staggering single-digit percentage. A mounting FBI investigation, a potentially catastrophic eviction lawsuit, and growing outrage from the very residents who once supported her have exposed her leadership as weak, desperate, and unsustainable. Once hailed as a powerful and decisive leader, Henyard now finds herself in a fight for political survival. Among the most notorious events during her time in office was the annual turkey giveaway held just before Thanksgiving. Intended as a generous gesture to help the community, the event quickly became a symbol of Henyard's desperate attempts to deflect attention from the township's increasingly dire financial situation. Rather than portraying Henyard as a compassionate leader, the giveaway backfired, instead coming across as a weak political ploy to distract from her administration's failures. Public sentiment, already on shaky ground, took a sharp downturn following the incident, as more and more people saw through the veneer of her leadership this turkey giveaway was just the tip of the iceberg. Behind the scenes, Henyard's leadership has been characterized by a series of backdoor deals, dishonest tactics, and increasingly bizarre political stunts. Local politicians, activists, and the general public are now fully aware of her attempts to manipulate the system for personal and political gain. Christopher Gonzalez, one of the most vocal critics, has made public revelations about Henyard's increasing desperation and the lengths to which she has gone to maintain her grip on power. These revelations paint a picture of a leader willing to bend the law to her will rather than serve the people she was elected to represent. As Henyard's campaign spirals into chaos, it becomes increasingly clear that her every move is more about maintaining public attention than addressing the real problems facing the town. Rather than focusing on meaningful solutions for the community, she has resorted to erratic, attention-grabbing tactics designed to keep herself in the spotlight. Her willingness to exert authority in increasingly questionable ways, including attempting to force through critical decisions without following the proper legal protocols, has only alienated voters. Further, the mounting public frustration is compounded by the ongoing FBI investigation into her administration. The probe has raised serious questions about her involvement in various unethical and possibly illegal activities, further eroding what little trust she had left with the residents of Dunn. Henyard's approval ratings have taken a sharp nosedive, and with the election just around the corner, the stakes have never been higher. Meanwhile, the discontent among her constituents continues to grow. Once loyal supporters are now turning against her, demanding change and expressing frustration with the spectacle that her leadership has become. The one strong political base that Henyard built her career on has all but evaporated, replaced by a growing wave of resentment and calls for her removal from office. The more she clings to power, the more she alienates the very people she was supposed to serve. Henyard's political strategy has now become one of survival rather than success. As the election approaches, her campaign has devolved into a frantic scramble to salvage her reputation and cling to any semblance of power. This has led to increasingly bizarre and reckless behavior, as Henyard desperately attempts to regain control over her narrative. From questionable alliances with local figures to openly defying the very laws she once promised to uphold, her leadership has grown more erratic and unpredictable by the day. In this context, the upcoming election looms large, not only as a test of Henyard's political future, but as a critical turning point for the town of Dunn. Will Henyard be able to rally her remaining supporters and turn the tide of public opinion in her favor, or will the growing tide of outrage and disillusionment lead to her downfall in one of the most spectacular political upsets in recent memory? The stakes are higher than ever, and the outcome remains uncertain as Henyard's political career hangs in the balance. As the election date draws closer, it's clear that Henyard's campaign is in freefall. Despite her best efforts to maintain control, the cracks in her leadership are impossible to ignore. Her approval ratings have cratered, and the mounting legal and ethical challenges she faces only add to her growing list of problems. For Henyard, the coming months will be critical. Will she be able to win back the trust of her former supporters and navigate the storm of controversy that surrounds her? Or will the next few weeks mark the final chapter in a political career that has already been marred by scandal and turmoil with each passing day? It becomes more and more apparent that Tiffany Henyard's grip on power is slipping away. As the election draws near, the race is shaping up to be one of the most dramatic and turbulent contests in recent history. The drama, The intrigue and the spectacle of this election will undoubtedly capture the public's attention, leaving an indelible mark on the political landscape of Dunn, Illinois. The only question now is whether Henyard can weather the storm or if the next election will be the beginning of the end of her political career.
Those entities, as we know, can take anywhere from 2 months to...
Tiffany Henyard's leadership in Dalton, Illinois, has deteriorated into a textbook case of incompetence, failure, and broken promises. As the town grapples with one of its worst winter storms in history, residents have been left to navigate hazardous, frozen roadways without any visible action or support from their mayor. For many, Henyard's failure to manage this urgent crisis is more than a lapse in leadership. It is a complete abdication of duty that has put citizens at risk and showcased a shocking lack of concern for their safety. Throughout the storm, Henyard seemed more focused on maintaining her social media presence than on addressing the dire needs of her community. This egregious neglect has left the residents of Dalton feeling betrayed and helpless as their needs go unmet. The town's financial situation, under Henyard's administration, has only worsened. Allegations of poor management are widespread, with critics claiming that Henyard has continued to drain government funds, using them to support her personal and political interests rather than addressing the town's growing needs. If the financial troubles weren't bad enough, local business owners have publicly condemned her obstructionist tactics. These tactics have made it nearly impossible for businesses to expand or even obtain basic permits to operate. Henyard's policies have created an environment of hostility, where local entrepreneurs feel they are being actively sabotaged for political gain. Among the most vocal critics is Lawrence Gardner, the owner of a local trucking company, who publicly compared Henyard's actions to those of Nino Brown, the infamous drug lord from the film New Jack City. Gardner likened her coercive tactics to criminal intimidation, claiming that she used the power of her office to bully and control local businesses for her own political advantage. This comparison sent shockwaves through the community, revealing that many felt Henyard's leadership style had shifted from poor governance to an outright authoritarian approach, all in service of maintaining her hold on power. For many in Dalton, this was not just poor leadership. It was a calculated attempt to control the community and suppress any dissent that might threaten her political survival. As Henyard's approval rating continued to plummet, the public's dissatisfaction with her administration reached a boiling point. During a public meeting, one irate resident shouted, "This is embarrassing," echoing the sentiments of many others who felt deceived by Henyard's behavior. The anger was palpable, with many expressing a sense of betrayal and helplessness in a community where their concerns and needs had been ignored. Charges that Henyard had pushed Dalton to its breaking point, all in service of her own political ambitions, were now commonplace. Many saw her leadership as a desperate power grab rather than a genuine effort to improve the town. Henyard's refusal to step down, despite the mounting criticism and public outrage, only reinforced the perception that she was more interested in holding on to power than in serving the people of Dalton. The town, already struggling with a myriad of financial problems, was now on the verge of collapse, exacerbated by her inability to meet basic community needs. It had become increasingly clear that the longer Henyard clung to power, the more she alienated the very people who had once supported her. Further complicating Henyard's already precarious position were two town trustees, Chris Gonzalez and Carmen Carlisle, who failed to attend a crucial meeting. Without enough board members present, important decisions couldn't be made, and this only highlighted the dysfunction that had come to define Henyard's leadership. Her inability to maintain control over her own team further damaged her reputation and demonstrated her failure to effectively govern. But it wasn't just local grievances that were threatening Henyard's hold on power. An ongoing FBI investigation into her re-election campaign cast a long shadow over her administration. Federal authorities had seized important financial data from both Dalton and Thoron Township, including documents related to dubious contracts and alleged misappropriation of public funds. Despite Henyard's strong denials of any wrongdoing, the investigation was still ongoing, and it raised serious questions about her political future. As the pressure mounted, it became clear that Henyard's re-election campaign was not just a political contest. It was a desperate attempt to maintain power and evade possible criminal charges that could result from the ongoing investigations. The community's frustration with Henyard's leadership continued to grow, and residents began to call for reform. Many felt that the mayor had mismanaged the town to the point where basic services couldn't even be provided. A growing number of Dalton residents were angry and disillusioned, ready for change. In the face of the mounting crises, Henyard seemed increasingly detached from the reality of the situation, Focusing on her political survival rather than the well-being of her constituents, Henyard's financial troubles were also spilling over into her personal life. One of her key allies, Kyle Wood, was embroiled in an eviction lawsuit for unpaid rent. While this might have seemed like a trivial matter on the surface, it only served to underscore deeper issues within Henyard's administration. The financial mismanagement that plagued Dalton was not limited to the public sector, but appeared to extend into her personal relationships, as well as the pressure on Henyard mounted. Her refusal to accept responsibility for her actions only made the situation more chaotic. Rather than owning up to her failures, she adopted an increasingly self-serving approach to governance. Many former allies, including former trustee Kate Beller, accused her of ruling in an autocratic fashion, using intimidation and manipulation to suppress political opposition. The police department, once seen as a neutral force in the community, had allegedly been used to target Henyard's political enemies, according to former police chief Robert Collins. This revelation added fuel to the growing fire of corruption accusations, further tarnishing Henyard's reputation. Henyard's paranoia and growing sense of vulnerability led to the hiring of a large security detail, which became a permanent fixture in her administration. The presence of the security force raised questions about her priorities. Many residents saw it as a clear indication that Henyard was more concerned with maintaining her grip on power than with addressing the pressing issues facing the town. The cost of maintaining the security detail was staggering, diverting resources that could have been better spent on repairing the town's crumbling infrastructure or providing essential services to residents struggling under her mismanagement. As Henyard's tenure continued, the financial situation in Dalton grew more dire. The town was unable to meet even the most basic operational needs, and the future of the community seemed increasingly uncertain. Residents were growing more desperate for change, and the call for reform became a rallying cry for those who felt that Henyard had failed them. Her leadership had gone from bad to worse, and the prospect of re-electing her seemed increasingly unlikely. Many believed that Dalton needed a new direction, one that would prioritize the needs of the community over the selfish political ambitions of its leader. In the midst of all this turmoil, Henyard's personal life continued to unravel. Her close ally Kyle Wood's eviction lawsuit was a stark reminder that the financial mismanagement plaguing Dalton was not an isolated issue. This situation, coupled with the growing public backlash against her leadership, painted a picture of a mayor who had become disconnected from the very people she was supposed to serve. As the election loomed, Dalton found itself at a crossroads. The town's future hung in the balance, and Henyard's political career seemed to be crumbling before her eyes. Her refusal to step down, despite the mounting evidence of her failures, only deepened the sense of dysfunction and instability that had come to define her leadership. What had once been a promising political career had devolved into a bitter struggle for survival. Henyard's financial mismanagement, her disregard for the concerns of her constituents, and the mounting legal challenges she faced all pointed to one inevitable conclusion. Her days in office were numbered. The investigation into Henyard's administration only intensified as the election drew nearer, and the likelihood of her political and personal demise grew with each passing day. The situation in Dalton had become untenable, and residents were left wondering if they would ever recover from the damage caused by Henyard's reign. Her tenure had been marked by corruption, poor leadership, and a blatant disregard for the needs of the community. As Dalton approached the election, the town was in crisis, with no clear path forward. The public's anger, the mounting legal challenges, and the town's crumbling finances had combined to create a perfect storm that threatened to bring Henyard's political career to a crashing halt. With each new scandal, her grip on power weakened, and the prospect of her re-election seemed increasingly unlikely. The town, once vibrant and full of promise, now found itself on the brink of collapse, caught in the grip of a mayor whose incompetence and corruption had all but destroyed its future.
We just want to get some responsible adults.
Dalton, Illinois, is currently in the midst of a significant crisis, largely due to the leadership of Mayor Tiffany Henyard, whose once promising political career has unraveled amidst mounting scandals, financial mismanagement, and an increasing inability to meet the community's basic needs. As the town grapples with its deepening problems, the calls for a change in leadership grow louder. Henyard's grip on power appears to be slipping, and her future as mayor hangs in the balance as both public and legal pressures escalate under Henyard's leadership. Dalton has descended into a state of instability. Her administration has been marked by extravagant spending, increasing legal battles, and a troubling disregard for the needs of the town's residents. With the town's financial resources stretched thin, It's become glaringly obvious that Dalton needs a new direction, one that can address the growing dissatisfaction with Henyard's leadership and the town's dwindling trust in her ability to govern. What once seemed to be a promising political career has now devolved into a series of legal disputes, financial chaos, and an ever-widening gap between Henyard's carefully crafted persona as a capable leader and the reality of her failures. The situation in Dalton is dire. Henyard's inability to manage even the most basic functions of governance, combined with reports of dubious contracts, ongoing eviction lawsuits, and a growing list of legal entanglements, has fueled public skepticism and dissatisfaction. As the residents of Dalton watch their mayor's personal and professional lives collide in increasingly dramatic ways, it has become clear that Henyard's leadership is not just ineffective. It's become a source of further instability. Perhaps the most telling sign of Henyard's diminished authority came when a Cook County court invalidated her appointment of Michael Smith as executive assistant to the special counsel. This decision was a major blow to Henyard's political standing, exposing her lack of control over critical aspects of her administration. It underscored a growing perception that many of her decisions were either made by others or were now being investigated by the legal system, further tarnishing her credibility and leadership. In addition to her increasing legal troubles, Henyard's actions have left the town financially strained. Reports of mismanagement, questionable spending, and a failure to meet even the most basic community needs have led to a growing sense of disillusionment among Dalton residents. Her inability to address the town's financial woes has fueled widespread frustration. As citizens watch their government collapse under the weight of her leadership failures, the situation has also been exacerbated by infighting within the township board. Trustees Christopher Gonzalez and Carmen Carlisle have actively worked to undermine Henyard's authority, effectively preventing her from obtaining a quorum for meetings and stalling critical decisions. This disruption, which has involved delaying meetings until key deadlines have passed, is a direct challenge to Henyard's control and further exposes a dysfunction within the town's political structure. The rift within the board has grown wider, and it has become apparent that Henyard's leadership is openly contested, not just by the public, but by key figures within her own administration. Henyard's inability to maintain cohesion within her own government has paralyzed the town's ability to address pressing issues. Meetings remain stalled, and the basic functions of local governance are nearly impossible to carry out. This dysfunction has left the town in a precarious position, unable to effectively manage critical services or make necessary decisions. The situation has become so dire that Dalton's government appears to be in a state of gridlock, unable to move forward on even routine matters. This breakdown in governance, once a rare occurrence, has now become a regular feature of Henyard's administration. The town's political system is bogged down by personal conflicts, and a lack of cooperation among key figures has made it nearly impossible to get anything done. Henyard's decision to appoint a hand-picked individual to fill a vacant trustee position only deepened divisions within the board, reinforcing the perception that she is more interested in consolidating power for personal gain than in fostering effective leadership. As the situation continues to deteriorate, Dalton's residents are growing more desperate for a change in leadership. Henyard's repeated failure to unite her board, combined with her increasing disregard for the public's needs, has fueled a growing mistrust of her ability to lead. The public is increasingly frustrated by her erratic, self-serving political maneuvers, and many are beginning to doubt her capacity to continue serving the community. The longer Henyard clings to power in the face of overwhelming opposition, the more her legitimacy erodes, and the clearer it becomes that Dalton needs a fresh, responsible direction. The most significant consequence of Henyard's failed leadership has been the growing sense of hopelessness among Dalton residents. The public's patience has run out, and the likelihood of Henyard's political and personal downfall increases with each passing day. The need for responsible leadership has never been more pressing. As Henyard's tenure as mayor becomes marked by failures and scandals, it is clear that Dalton can no longer afford to continue under her leadership. The fallout from Henyard's leadership is evident not only in the town's financial crisis, but also in the increasing frustration among Dalton residents. Many of those who once trusted her leadership are now disillusioned, as Henyard's failure to address their basic needs becomes more apparent with each passing day. Her actions have further alienated the very people she was elected to serve, and the divide between her and the public has only widened as her leadership has become increasingly self-serving and politically motivated. In addition to her financial mismanagement and legal issues, Henyard's leadership has been marked by an alarming disregard for transparency and accountability. The increasing public outcry for accountability reflects a deep desire for a new direction, one that can restore stability and trust in local governance. As Henyard's political and personal demise looms closer, it's clear that Dalton's residents are no longer willing to tolerate her chaotic and ineffective leadership despite the growing backlash. Henyard remains steadfast in her refusal to step down or change course. Her refusal to accept responsibility for her actions and her growing paranoia about political opposition have only intensified the dysfunction within Dalton's government. She has even gone so far as to rely on a large and costly security detail, which many see as an excessive use of town resources that could have been better allocated to address the town's financial and infrastructural needs. This excessive spending on security further reinforces the impression that Henyard is more concerned with maintaining her hold on power than in serving the community. Henyard's leadership has become a major point of contention for the residents of Dalton, who are increasingly frustrated with her failure to manage the town's resources and address their basic needs. As the investigation into her administration continues and public dissatisfaction grows, it is becoming increasingly clear that Henyard's time as mayor may soon come to an end. The financial crisis, mounting legal issues, and the breakdown in local governance have left Dalton in a state of turmoil. With no clear path forward and no effective leadership in sight, the stakes for Dalton's future are higher than ever, and the urgency for change has never been more apparent. The town's residents are desperate for responsible and competent leadership, and Henyard's increasingly erratic behavior has made it clear that she is no longer capable of providing it. As Dalton continues to face a growing crisis of governance, the question remains whether Henyard will be able to weather the storm of scandal and public outrage, or if the town will finally demand her resignation. Henyard's tenure has been marked by poor decision-making, infighting, financial mismanagement, and a complete disregard for the needs of Dalton's residents. Her leadership has caused significant harm to the community, and the longer she refuses to confront the reality of her failures, the more chaotic and unstable the situation becomes. The clock is ticking, and Dalton's future depends on whether it can reclaim stability and trust in its leadership, something that seems increasingly unlikely under Henyard's administration as Henyard's political career spirals toward an inevitable downfall. The town of Dalton is left wondering if it will ever be able to overcome the damage caused by her leadership. The need for a new direction has never been more urgent, and the fate of the town hangs in the balance as residents prepare for what may be the final chapter in Henyard's troubled political journey. The situation in Dalton is dire, and it's clear that a change in leadership is needed before the town can begin to heal and move forward in the end. Henyard's political future is uncertain, and the people of Dalton are left hoping for a resolution to the turmoil that has defined their leadership under her watch. Whether the town can recover from the damage inflicted by her administration remains to be seen, but one thing is certain: Dalton cannot continue to operate under the leadership of someone who has failed to meet even its most basic needs. The town deserves better, and its residents are ready for the change that will restore the stability and leadership they so desperately need.